Are you struggling with mobility but don't really know where to start? Well, I'm here to help. I'm Coach Paulina, and today I'm going to be taking you through 3 different joint sections. So we have your shoulder complex, your thoracic spine, and your hips. What we're going to be doing is I'm going to demo at-home tests for your mobility that you can do, and you can assess maybe any limitations that you may have within certain positions. After we've found those limitations, I'm going to give you exercises and movements that you can start to incorporate in your routine. The goal is to start to open up the body a little bit and increase that range of motion over time. Just a reminder that mobility work is really an everyday effort, and it can take a while to increase range of motion through the joints. So be patient and listen to your body, and we're going to be starting with the shoulder joint. Before we move into our first shoulder mobility test, make sure you're either doing this in front of a mirror or you're videotaping yourself so you can look back at the footage and know exactly where your mobility is. So our first test is going to be on your back. So go ahead and come into a supine position. We're going to be testing your overhead shoulder mobility first. From here, go ahead and stack your feet or your legs in tabletop position. Make sure the knees and hips are in one line. And then the rest of your spine here is pushing through the ground as you're bracing through that lower belly. Stack your arms, make sure your wrists are right above your shoulders. And from here, we're going to reach into an overhead position as far as you can go. And then the idea is to have the back of the hand touch the ground. So whenever you're ready, big inhale, big reach. Then big exhale. Take it back to center. Ideally, we would do about 2 to 3 repetitions. And make sure you are cold so you haven't done a warm-up before your tests. Good, go ahead and recover. I'm going to show you a different variation of your overhead reach, and then we'll talk about what your results mean. So, planting both your feet into the ground, your spine is going to be neutral. So if you have a slight bend or a slight arch in that lower back, that's fine because that's your natural arch of your spine. Make sure you're bracing through your belly, and then the rest of your body is planted. From here, same idea, big inhale as we overhead reach. Then exhale, bring it back to center. Go ahead and just do one more. Go ahead and recover. So now that we tested that overhead mobility, let's go over potential results that you may have seen in your body, in your mobility. So with this first variation with legs in tabletop position, if you weren't able to reach all the way up and overhead to reach the ground, this may mean that there is some sort of tightness within your lat muscle, that big back muscle that we have and you typically see during pull-ups. So lats and shoulders work together a lot of the times. Next, with your feet planted, if you were still not able to reach the ground, then that means that your true shoulder mobility is being affected right now. And that just means it can come from different areas of the shoulder. So after we do test number 2, I'm going to give you an exercise that's going to help directly with that. All right, our second test for your shoulder is Apley's scratch test. So what does that mean? Apley's scratch test, we test internal and external rotation of your shoulder. So that's really important if you're an athlete, especially doing a lot of different rotations within the shoulder, or if you just want to be a functional human and have shoulders that work well. For this one, I do recommend standing upright for it, but for the purpose of a good angle, I'm going to go ahead and stay seated, and I'm going to face my back to you so you can see exactly what's going on. So Apley's scratch test We want to make sure we're doing it right. So arms are going to be out to a T, palms are facing forward, fingertips are wide. Simultaneously, we're going to take the right arm and the left arm, and you're going to reach one arm up and overhead as the other arm comes down and behind your back. You're going to start to bend through those elbows and reach as far down your spine and then as far upwards towards your spine with the other arm as possible. So this end position, your fingers are wide, your hands are planted on your upper back and lower back, and we're just trying to reach those fingertips together. Go ahead and take it back out to a T. Typically, I like to do this test anywhere from 2 to 3 times, so let's go ahead and just do one more time. What we don't want to see in Apley's test is shimmying or reaching those fingertips together. That would be considered cheating. Another thing that we don't want to see with the test is an arch in the back. So that shows that you're not able to truly access internal and external rotation from the shoulders, that you're really relying on your mid-back to get into the position. All right, we're going to go ahead and switch sides, and then we're going to talk about what this data means. Okay, make sure you stick position, and then come right back out to a T. Let's go ahead and do one more on this side. And recover. So with Apley's scratch test, the distance between your fingertips is telling you whether or not you need to work on internal or external rotation of the shoulders. So with the arm that's going behind you, this is internal rotation, and then the arm that's going up and above, that is your external rotation. So if the fingertips are touching, that means you have good mobility, you have proper mobility. If you're like me and you have tightness or you can work a little bit more on your rotation, that means you have room for improvement. So there is quite a gap here that I have. I can't touch my fingers together. So that means I've got to start implementing some sort of rotational work and rotational mobility for my shoulder routine. So now that we've tested overhead mobility, internal and external rotation of the shoulders, make sure you have that data and you know exactly what you can start working on. This exercise that I'm going to demo is a great starting point, and two, it's just awesome to either start out or work out with it to help open up the shoulder or do a cool down with it as well. So this is exercise number 1. I'm going to have you start in quadruped position. Shoulders and wrists are stacked, hips and knees are stacked. And take a few mini cat and cows to find your neutral spine. Once you find neutral, make sure you're bracing through that lower belly. We're going to take one arm at a time, and you're going to start into that overhead reach with thumbs up. So you're really fighting against gravity to feel your shoulder activate and hit the range that you currently have. From here, we're going to open out to the side, palm facing the ground, and then we're going to complete the rotation by reaching towards the back wall with your palm up, and then placing the palm on the lower back. We're going to reverse this motion and bring it back to your start position. So I recommend for these doing anywhere from 8 to 12 repetitions on each side, either as a warm-up or as a cool down. And really what's cool about this exercise, this big rotational shoulder exercise in quadruped, is we're working those ranges of motion that we just tested for your mobility. So we have that overhead reach, and then internal, a little bit of external rotation as well. Awesome. So once you would finish all your repetitions on your right side, you would then go ahead and work on your left side. I also have a bonus for you, so go ahead and click this link right here if you want a full shoulder mobility routine that you can start doing either as a warm-up, a cool-down, or a supplementary mobility day for your routine. What's cool about the shoulder mobility routine is it gives you more exercises in different ranges for your shoulders to start increasing their mobility. Great, that was our shoulder. Next, we're gonna go ahead and move into your thoracic spine. Let's get ready to test out your thoracic spine mobility. Our first test is going to test extension and flexion. And a great exercise to test that with is a cat and cow. So go ahead and meet me in all four, tabletop position. So similar to before, make sure your shoulders and wrists are stacked, hips and knees as well. From here, we're gonna start in a cow position, meaning we're dropping that belly button towards the mat, taking it one vertebrae at a time, reaching your gaze up towards the ceiling and really opening up the chest. From here, you're going to exhale, cat, and tuck your hips underneath. Start to articulate through your spine and really round out your back. We're gonna do two more just like that, and then we're gonna talk about what this means and what you might see with your body. Good, take these nice and slow, and just listen to your body throughout the range. Let's do one more of each. Great job. Go ahead and take a second here to recover. So a few things that are common to see with cat and cow is with spinal extension, it's very common to see just a limited range of extension. Extension is one of those positions for the spine that we're not really used to doing, especially if we're sitting on the computer all day, rounded shoulders forwards, and this is just maybe a more comfortable position for us. But extension really forces us to open up and just kind of get used to allowing the front side of the body to kind of relax, and then the back side of your body to just activate and open up a little bit more. So you might have seen a limited extension. And then for your flexion or rounding of the spine, maybe you saw that you weren't able to separate those shoulder blades, so really round out through that upper back. Or maybe you felt like you couldn't tuck your chin towards the chest. Also a very common area. This kind of goes along with shoulders and the ability to really move those scapula or shoulder blades separate from your thoracic spine. So with flexion and extension, there are a large amount of exercises that you can do to start to kind of segment your spine and really be able to control it in different positions. After test number 2, I'm going to give you those exercises that you can start to implement into your routine. All right, so your second test for T-spine mobility, instead of now testing your flexion and extension, we're going to be going into a little bit of rotation from side to side. So a good thing to carry with you is either a towel, or if you have a yoga block, that would be great. And we're going to secure your hips into place, and I'm going to have you really push your thighs into either the box or the towel, so you're creating that squeeze inwards. If this position of sitting on your feet is uncomfortable, you can always take a chair, sit on a chair, feet are flat on the ground, and same thing, you're pushing into the block. Cool. From here, go ahead and stack your right hand on top, left hand underneath, and you're going to create contact with your palms and shoulders. So you're going to keep that contact as we rotate. So from here, since the right hand is on top, the left hand is underneath, we're going to be rotating towards your right side. So from here, rotate as far as you can go, and slowly take it back to center. Let's go ahead and do 2 more on this side. Make sure your hips still stay center and that we're not shifting the lower body into your rotation. Last one. Good, shake it out. I'm gonna show you 1 repetition that is technically bad form. So kind of see what happened with my hips here as I'm shifting into one side, I'm not keeping neutral, and then my rotation was just wonky. Okay, we're gonna switch over to the other side. So left hand stacking on top of that right shoulder, we're gonna be rotating towards the left. So same idea, create tension with your block or towel. Make sure you're sitting up nice and tall, and we're solely relying on your mid-back to take us into that rotation towards the left. Nice job. Woo. Go ahead and recover. If that felt a little uncomfortable, that is totally normal. Side to side rotation is one of those movements that can limit us in many different ways. So what this tells us, and what you can start to kind of dissect within what you saw in the mirror or what you saw on camera, is if your range is limited on one side, you'll see you're only able to reach towards a certain degree. And then maybe the other side, you're super mobile and we're able to reach on that side. So that means potentially there's one side of the body that's either really tight or underactive, and maybe the other side is not as tight and overactive. It's working way too much. So there are exercises that can help some rotation within your mid-back, and let's go ahead and go over those. So exercise number 1, we're gonna go back into cat and cow to first work on flexion and extension. So we're gonna do a seated cat and cow. So once again, you're gonna be sitting on those heels, and then we're gonna position your hands right underneath your shoulders in this forward bend. From here, we're gonna go first into your extension, and then flexion. What I like about this cat and cow position is that we're taking out some of the motion from the hips, so we're locking down the hips into place, and you're going to really be able to focus in on that mid-back area to upper back area. So for cat and cow, this is a great warm-up or cool-down of the spine. As you're doing these for your mobility practice and your mobility prep, I want you to really slow down your cat and cow and try to segment and really point out maybe the weak points that you have within your back, or maybe like a certain area that's just not moving the way you want it to. Cat and cow, I usually just listen to my body for the sets and repetitions. If that day I'm feeling especially tight, I might do more sets and keep the repetitions very low, but going extremely slow with them. So this seated and kneeling position, cat and cow, is a great place to start to really bring awareness to your thoracic area to start to increase that range of motion. Cool. Next, we can move on to your second exercise, and this is where we're going to focus in on your thoracic rotation, and it's called thread the needle. You've probably done these before, so let's go over it. Go ahead and meet me in quadruped position. From here, we're going to take our right hand and spread those fingers wide and position them right outside of that right ear. You can go ahead and make contact with your head just so you have that feedback. From here, you're going to rotate from your mid-back and reach your elbow up towards the ceiling as far as you can go without shifting through your hips or losing integrity of that lower core brace. So once again, that initial rotation, elbow up towards the ceiling. Make sure your gaze follows where you're rotating. From here, we're going to take that rotation down into thread the needle. So you're going to extend your right arm through this left side. And once you hit the bottom range of motion, Feel free to slightly lean into your right shoulder, set your right ear on your mat, and hold for as long as you need. 3 seconds is usually the sweet spot here. And feel free to take it back to neutral before you go into your second repetition. Big rotation, thread the needle, and breathe into the back of the shoulder. Thread the needle, similarly to cat and cow. Typically recommend doing low repetitions and moderate sets. So really 2 to 3 sets with 4 to 6 repetitions, just keeping it nice and slow and really focusing in on honing into that thoracic area and opening up, working on that rotation. So those were the 2 exercises that you can start implementing into your routine. That's the thoracic spine. Let's go ahead and move on into your hips. Our last joints of the 3 are the hips. Our first test is going to be testing hip flexion, and we're going to start in a supine position. So go ahead and lie all the way down. Good. So from here, make sure that your back is pretty much flat. There might be like a tiny curve within that low back. That is okay, as long as you are bracing through your lower abdomen and protecting your back. That's all we're really worried about here. You're going to be pressing your hands into the ground, so both palms are pressing here, keeping those arms straight and long at your side. And you just choose whichever leg you would like to test first. So for me, it's going to be that right leg. And this is very simple. All that we're doing is we're going to reach that leg towards you. So toe facing your nose. And then you're just going to bring it all the way back down. So let's go for 3 total repetitions. Hip flexion, reach, 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 bring it down. Hand, last one. Good, go ahead and recover. We're gonna go ahead and switch sides before I kind of explain what this test is exactly testing. Good, get those 3 reps in. Once again, make sure you're bracing through that belly, pushing those hands through the ground. Last one. Good, go ahead and recover. So with hip flexion, a pass test is being able to reach your leg past that bottom knee. So making sure your heel is able to reach past the bottom knee. So that would be considered adequate flexion from that hip. If your leg only reaches up to here, that would be a fail. That means we gotta work on some hip flexion on each side. If during the exercise you felt like your core was really being challenged, but you may have felt lower back tension as that leg came up, that's either a bracing issue or it may mean that the hamstrings are tight and limiting you in the position. So a sign of tight hamstrings can also mean weak hamstrings. And I'll take you through an exercise that directly strengthens those hamstrings. So that is your leg leg flexion test. And next, we're gonna go into 2 different movement patterns. So that's gonna be hip internal rotation and hip external rotation. So I'm gonna go ahead and position you into a 90-90 position, and I love having a mat on the ground because you can kind of line up your legs exactly with the mat to kind of see where you're at. So with your 90-90 position, we want to make sure that we're creating those angles within the knees here, that we're able to open up the thigh and then the shin here, creating 90 degrees on each side. So the test really is your ability to hold this position and then switch to the other side without using your hands on the ground. It is pretty advanced, and I would kind of advise you to try with your hands on the ground first before you try any reps with your hands off the ground. So from your 90-90 position on one side, we're going to switch to the other side by shifting your weight into your heels, planting your feet on the ground, and then shifting into 90-90 on your other side. Remember, if you've never done this before, you can go ahead and lean into those hands for a few repetitions and then give it a try. Hands come up off the ground, 90-90. If you're able to complete your 90-90 switches by holding yourself upright and arms are out in front of you, you have good internal and external rotation of the hips. If you're really struggling to even sit into that 90-90 position, there is room for improvement, and I'll give you those tools that you can start helping yourself with. Good, so 90-90 is a great starting point to kind of see where you're at with internal and external rotation of your hip joint. So let's go ahead and move on. Go ahead and shake it out for a second. And the first exercise that I'll have us do is for that hip flexion. And remember when I said tight hamstrings is potentially a sign for weak hamstrings? Well, this exercise is going to help strengthen those hamstrings, and it's going to strengthen them in an eccentric way. So we're eccentrically loading those muscles, or time under tension, so really lengthening the muscle as we're putting more pressure into it, and I think you're gonna feel this burn. So for the first exercise, make sure you do have a towel and more of a slippery surface so we can actually create tension through the ground. What this is a hip bridge position with an emphasis on loading those hamstrings. So you're going to press into the ground with your palms pressing into the ground, arms are straight, and at the top of your hip bridge, you're going to engage your glutes, so you can even poke at it to make sure that it's active, and your hamstrings as well. So make sure these guys are nice and active, and that you're just creating a neutral position for your hips, that we're not overextending or hyperextending. Your bridge is just a solid foundation, and you feel good to move out of this position. From your hip bridge, you're going to extend your legs and drive your heels all the way to the ground and slowly lower yourself. From here, we're going to reset into that bridge. Before you start to move those feet, make sure your bridge is a solid position. And then slowly drag those heels on the ground and return back to starting position. So for these eccentric bridges, anywhere from 8 to 15 repetitions, 2 to 3 sets, is a great way to start creating that strength within the hamstrings, as well as bringing awareness into the hamstrings. So let's do one more, and then I'll show you the next exercise. Good, this is a killer. Woo. Go ahead and shake it out. All right, so next, we're gonna practice internal and external rotation of the hips. So something that maybe the 90-90s felt super uncomfortable, but it's still something that you want to practice. So instead of doing 90-90, I'm gonna get you into a shin box. So go ahead and get into your seated position here. And instead of creating 90-degree angles, we're gonna have that top foot making contact with your bottom thigh. So it's gonna look a little bit more narrow stance than before. So in your shin box position, think about sitting up nice and tall, creating that neutral spine, breathing into the lower belly. And then for an additional kind of stretch or activation, I'm gonna have you lean into your front leg until you feel a stretch within the glutes, and then we're gonna hold. So it's just a 3-second hold, and really breathing into your joints, into your muscles that might be tense, and then slowly coming up. For the switch, go ahead and have your hands on the ground, just so you can start to focus in on your form a little bit, focus in on your range of motion. Good, square those hips towards your front leg, slowly lower into the position, and push your legs into the ground as we hold for 3, 2, 1, good. So shin box to hold. This is a great exercise to do, right before your leg day. Maybe this is an off day and you're just doing some mobility drills for your hips. It can also be utilized as your cool down. So once again, we are actively working in on internal and external rotation. You might feel tension in your glutes, maybe the outside of the hip as well. And the goal is to eventually open up this stance into that 90-90 and getting you comfortable by stacking your spine and going from side to side with confidence, not feeling like you're about to fall over, but staying stacked and trusting those hips. Great job today. So we learned a lot of different mobility tests that you can start utilizing and see where your starting point is, as well as those exercises that I introduced to you. So these can all be implemented gradually in your training program. We made it to the end. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope your joints feel amazing and that you were able to take away a few exercises that you can start implementing into your fitness routine. Make sure to like, subscribe, and comment below. I'm super curious to hear about your biggest takeaway. I'll see you next time.